It was the kind of Saturday that made you believe in summer again, sun warm, but not oppressive grass soft under bare feet, and the smell of marinated ribs drifting through the neighborhood like a promise. We had been throwing the annual backyard BBQ for 11 years straight. Ever since my dad passed, I'd made it a tradition invite the neighbors grill all day, let the kids run wild, and give Mom a chance to laugh again. This year felt like the biggest yet. We had over 30 RSVP'd guests, 2 full smokers going, and my Uncle Danny swore he'd finally bring his legendary banana pudding instead of just bragging about it. Everyone came, well, almost everyone. Everyone except the woman in the blue colonial with the perfect hedges and binoculars, always resting just below her windowsill. Karen. No one really knew her last name. She had moved in 6 months prior and hadn't so much as waved once. Rumor was she had lived in 5 different HOAs across the country and fought with every one of them. We had no beef with her. In fact, I tried to introduce myself when she first moved in, walked over with a welcome basket my mom made only to be met with a closed door and a no soliciting sign that appeared on her lawn the next morning. So we let her be. That's what you do in neighborhoods like ours. Live and let live. Besides, the rest of the cul-de-sac loved the BBQ. Mr. Harmon from across the street brought his famous cornbread, the Guzmans brought their folding chairs and abuela, and even the high school seniors from 2 blocks over asked if they could help serve. Around 2 p.m., I was by the grill flipping racks of ribs and basting them with my homemade cherry bourbon sauce when I noticed Karen standing by her fence, arms crossed, staring. I gave her a polite nod. She didn't nod back. Instead, she pulled out a phone, turned her back, and began speaking loudly. My cousin Jasmine, who was prepping side dishes on the patio, leaned over to me. She's talking about the smoke, says we're disrupting air quality. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but Jasmine wasn't smiling. She said she'll report us to the HOA, she added, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Wants to review open flame regulations for shared zones. I squinted over at Karen's property line. It was at least 12 feet from our grill with a stone wall in between. No branches overhead. No fire hazard. Nothing. She serious, I asked. Jasmine nodded, dead serious. I shrugged. Let her. We're not doing anything illegal. For the rest of the afternoon, we tried to ignore it. Music played. Kids chased bubbles. We handed out cold drinks and hot dogs like a well-oiled machine. Even Mom smiled the way she used to before everything went sideways in our lives. For a few hours, we had that old spark back, that sense of belonging, of home. Then, as the sun began to dip and the sky blushed in gold, it happened. Karen returned, this time not alone. She walked straight to the edge of our lawn, holding a laminated sheet of paper, HOA bylaw excerpts, highlighted in orange, yellow, and pink. Her voice cut through the chatter like a slap. You are in violation of sections 8.3, 10.4, and 12.1 of the HOA covenant. I turned off the music. She continued. Excessive smoke, amplified noise, and unauthorized gatherings exceeding 10 individuals. I stepped forward. Ma'am, we've hosted this BBQ every year. No one's complained. We're not violating anything. Karen smirked. That's because no one enforced the rules before I moved in. Then she did something I didn't expect. She pulled out her phone again and started filming us. You're all being documented, she said. For the record, HOA will be notified. People looked around, confused. Some laughed nervously. Others whispered. I felt heat rise in my face, not from the grill. Before I could say anything, she turned and walked away, still filming her voice saying, endangerment of public space. I will be submitting a formal report first thing Monday. I tried to shake it off. Tried to focus on packing up the food, thanking guests, making sure no trash was left behind. But the mood had shifted. Kids were quiet. Adults murmured in clusters. Mom went inside early. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. You will be hearing from the HOA. Enjoy your little party. I didn't sleep well. Not because I thought we'd done something wrong, but because I knew people like Karen. I'd seen them in courtrooms, in hearings, in small-town politics. People who didn't just want to follow rules, they wanted to be the rules. And when those kinds of people feel ignored, they escalate. And I had a feeling Karen was just getting started. Monday morning came with a thud, a literal one. As I opened my front door to grab the paper, I nearly tripped over a large, white envelope sitting on the doormat. It wasn't the usual mail. It had the HOA's embossed logo in the corner and my full name typed in bold across the front. Inside was a formal notice of violation. Violation, unauthorized, community gathering, subsections, cited excessive noise, open flame, obstruction of neighbor enjoyment. Penalty, initial warning with potential fines up to $250 per infraction per day. Attached to the notice were 2 printed photos. One showed me flipping ribs at the grill. The other, taken from Karen's upstairs window, I'd bet anything showed the yard full of guests. It was time-stamped, labeled Exhibit A. My stomach dropped, not because I was guilty, but because this confirmed what I already suspected: Karen wasn't bluffing. She was building a case. I showed the letter to my mom at the kitchen table. She read it in silence, then looked up with tired eyes. "Don't let her ruin this," she said quietly. "Your father loved those BBQs." I nodded, but my chest still tightened. That afternoon, I emailed the HOA president, a man named Richard Green. He had always been reasonable in the past, showing up to neighborhood meetings in jeans and eating 3 servings of my mac and cheese at every block party. I wrote, "Dear Mr. Green, I received a violation notice this morning related to our family BBQ. I believe there may be a misunderstanding, and I'd appreciate a chance to clarify. Our gathering complied with all safety guidelines and was well within property limits. I look forward to resolving this respectfully. Best, Lucas." His reply came 2 hours later. Short, cold. "Dear Mr. Lucas, thank you for your note. As per HOA procedure, complaints must be formally addressed in writing and will be reviewed at the next scheduled board meeting. In the meantime, please refer to your HOA handbook for clarification on event limitations. Sincerely, Richard Green, HOA president." No apology, no acknowledgement of the years I'd lived here in peace. Just a brush off. That evening, while walking to retrieve the recycling bins, I noticed Karen outside clipping her hedges with a pair of sharp chrome shears. Her lips curled into a thin smile. "Hope you liked the letter," she called. I didn't respond. "You know," she added, trimming a bush into a disturbingly square shape, "some of us actually read the bylaws." I turned and walked back up the driveway. The next day, I found a second envelope. This one had a yellow sticky note on top, second documentation for HOA records. Inside were printed screenshots of my cousin Tom, the police chief, helping my grandmother into a lawn chair. The caption underneath read, "Possible code conflict, law enforcement, attending private event in uniform." There was even a claim about neighborhood intimidation via perceived authority presence. I laughed out loud. Karen was accusing my cousin, the police chief, of intimidating neighbors by attending a barbecue. It would have been hilarious if it weren't so calculated. I called Tom that evening. He chuckled, but there was an edge in his voice. "She's reaching," he said. "But if she's documenting everything, maybe you should too. Keep your own paper trail." So I did. I began saving emails, taking photos, backing up footage from the backyard security cameras. I even compiled testimony from guests' statements about how peaceful the BBQ had been, how no one felt unsafe or disturbed. It wasn't about a grill anymore. It was about control. Karen was setting the tone for how the neighborhood would function from now on. The HOA was either turning a blind eye or being pressured into compliance. By Thursday, my neighbors began to feel it too. Mr. Harmon received a violation for his wind chimes. The Guzmans were warned about their front porch seating blocking sight lines. Even Jasmine, who parked in front of our house, temporarily got a note about prohibited street-side idling. We were being picked off one by one. At the end of the week, I hosted a quiet dinner for close family. No music, no lights strung up, just us eating tacos in the yard, trying to decompress. My niece was drawing chalk flowers on the patio when Karen walked by on the sidewalk. She paused, took out her phone, snapped a photo, didn't say a word, just turned and left. Later that night, another email came in from the HOA, continued reports of outdoor congregation and noise levels. I sat in silence at my desk, staring at the screen. Karen wasn't just weaponizing the bylaws, she was manipulating the system to punish community. And the more people pushed back, the more relentless she became. Still, part of me hoped it would stop at warnings, that she'd feel satisfied being the new sheriff in town. But I was wrong, because what came next wasn't a letter or a complaint or a whisper. It was 911 and flashing lights. Saturday arrived with a nervous hum in the air. Despite everything, Mom insisted we go forward with our smaller version of the BBQ, a tight-knit gathering of immediate family. No music, no extra guests, just enough food to keep tradition alive and spirits from sinking. She said if we give up our traditions to fear, we've already lost more than a grill. I wanted to believe her. We set up the grill behind the garage, far from the street and any sightlines from Karen's windows. We kept voices, low the radio off, and only used our side yard for seating. Even the kids played quieter than usual, as if they sensed the tension shadowing the day. Around 4 p.m., I was turning a batch of skewers when my niece tugged my shirt. There's a lady across the street taking pictures again. I looked up. Karen stood at her mailbox, not checking mail, not walking a dog, just standing. Phone angled toward our driveway. Finger tapping the screen every few seconds. Snap, snap, snap. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of her taking pictures. She quickly turned and walked back inside. 10 minutes later, a white SUV with HOA decals rolled past the house. I recognized the driver, Kevin Mitchell, the HOA compliance officer. Young guy, maybe 28, who once borrowed my snowblower. He didn't stop, just slowed to a crawl, eyes flicking from our porch to the grill like he was taking mental notes. Mom came over drying her hands. They're trying to catch you breaking something. I haven't broken anything, I muttered. No open flames near fences. No loud music, no code violations. But you're smiling, she said, half joking. Maybe that's the new offense. We laughed, but it didn't last long. At exactly 5:12 p.m., the siren started. Not one car. 3. Flashing red and blue, spilled across our driveway. Radios crackled, doors slammed, and just like that, a peaceful family meal turned into an interrogation scene. A uniformed officer approached the porch, hand resting on his belt. We received a 911 call regarding illegal burning and possible trespassing during an unpermitted public event. Are you serious? I asked, stepping forward. This is my house. That's my family. We're having dinner. One of the other officers was already circling the property line, eyeing the grill like it was a weapon. Then Tom pulled up. He wasn't in uniform, but everyone knew him. As the police chief of our district, he had command presence even in jeans and a button-down shirt. He walked straight to the officers. What's going on? He asked calmly. The lead cop replied. Dispatch received a call about a potential code fire violation. Said it was on public land. This isn't public land, Tom said, gesturing around. It's private property. I've been here dozens of times. Caller said there were loud noises, aggressive behavior, and potential fireworks. Another added, flipping through a notepad. Tom looked at me. You launching fireworks now? Just burgers, I said. He nodded slowly, then turned back to the officers. I can confirm there are no code violations, no disturbances, and no threats here. The caller may be misinformed or intentionally abusing emergency services. He didn't say Karen's name, but we all knew. The officers apologized reluctantly and began to withdraw. Before they left, one handed me a paper incident receipt, number 37429. It listed the nature of the complaint and a checkbox marked unsubstantiated. Tom stayed behind. We sat on the porch while Mom poured him a drink. She called 911 on my niece's birthday party last year, he said. Different city, same Karen. My jaw dropped. You're kidding. He shook his head. They're all over the country. Not every Karen is named Karen, but they thrive in HOAs, latch onto power, and escalate until someone finally tells them no. Well, I said, raising my glass, she's met her match. But Tom didn't smile. Don't underestimate her, he warned. She's not just annoying, she's strategic, and she's using HOA rules as cover to harass you. This isn't over. He was right, because the next morning, I received another violation notice from the HOA. This time citing misuse of outdoor cooking equipment and alleging intimidation of neighboring members via law enforcement presence. I laughed out loud, but deep inside I felt it. This wasn't just neighborhood drama anymore. It was war. And Karen wasn't playing fair. The next weekend, we canceled everything. No grill, no chairs on the lawn, no cousins dropping by with banana pudding or trays of cornbread. I didn't even mow the grass just to make sure no one could claim we were hosting anything. It was a strange silence, like someone had vacuumed the joy out of our property and left only the tension. But of course, Karen wasn't satisfied with silence. It was Saturday afternoon when I first noticed her, peeking from behind her curtain again. Not subtly either, she stood there hand-cupped to the glass like a sentry on watch. That alone made my nerves itch, but I said nothing. Around 3:00 p.m., my cousin Marcus came over to pick up a ladder I'd promised him. He pulled up, honked once, 2 quick, familiar taps, and I waved from the porch. Karen flung open her door and started walking toward the street with purpose. Marcus, not knowing what was going on, greeted her with a polite, "Good afternoon." She didn't answer. Just kept walking, muttering something I couldn't hear. Marcus looked at me confused. Everything all right? I shrugged. She thinks our driveway is a community threat. He chuckled. Wow. First time I've been labeled a public disturbance for picking up a ladder. Not 5 minutes after Marcus left, I heard it. The sirens again. And just like last time, they came fast. This time it was 2 police cruisers and an emergency responder SUV. Lights blazing. Neighbors poked their heads out from porches. Kids stood frozen on scooters. And standing triumphantly at the edge of her lawn, phone still in hand, was Karen. I stepped off the porch and walked toward the officers, hands open at my sides, calm and measured. I didn't want another misunderstanding. An officer I hadn't seen before, badge reading P. Drexler, looked over at me. We received a call about an unregistered public event with open flame and a possible threat to community safety. I blinked. A ladder exchange. That's what this is about. We were told this address was hosting an unsanctioned gathering again, he said, tone clipped. Did you see a gathering? I asked, gesturing around. There's no grill, no chairs, not even a lawn chair out here. Another officer radioed something in. After a few quiet replies, he turned to Drexler and nodded. No noise complaints confirmed. Caller reported offensive activity involving known individuals with law enforcement ties. I tilted my head. That's code for my cousin being the police chief, isn't it? Just then, a familiar truck pulled up. Tom! Again. He stepped out face neutral, but eyes sharp. Afternoon, he said. Heard my name got dragged into this again. Drexler straightened slightly. Sir? We were dispatched after receiving another emergency complaint. We're investigating. Tom looked around, then back at Drexler. This is my cousin's house. There is no BBQ, no event. You're standing in the quietest yard on the street. Karen, now standing at the edge of the sidewalk, chimed in. I saw people loitering. A strange man took something from his property and drove away. I didn't recognize the car. That could have been a weapon for all I know. Tom turned his voice razor sharp now. That was Marcus Washington, my cousin. He borrowed a ladder. Karen's face flushed red. I didn't know that. How was I supposed to? Tom didn't let her finish. You've now filed 2 false emergency reports, including misuse of 911 services. If there's a third, I'll have no choice but to open an investigation into criminal harassment and false reporting. Karen gasped. I'm protecting our neighborhood. No, Tom said flatly. You're harassing your neighbors under the guise of HOA enforcement. There's a difference, and believe me, I will make that distinction very clear to the DA if this continues. Silence. Even the officers looked away awkwardly. Karen turned and stormed off, slamming her door hard enough to rattle the windows. Tom looked at me. You need to start documenting everything. Emails, photos, video if you have it. Because this is going on the record. I nodded. Already started. He paused. Good. Because this is no longer just about grilling. It's about rights. That night I wrote everything down. Every word, every interaction. I saved the police report number and printed out the HOA bylaws. I also installed a second camera, this one pointed directly at the sidewalk. I didn't know what Karen's next move would be, but I had a feeling. She wasn't finished, and neither was I. It was the following Saturday when it all boiled over. Despite the chaos of the past 2 weekends, my family insisted we host a quiet backyard meal. Nothing flashy, just grilled corn, a few burgers, and iced tea. No guests, no fireworks, no loud music. But it was my dad's 70th birthday, and my mom said, if we can't even light a candle and eat together, what kind of life is that? I agreed. We even sent out an email to the HOA board, notifying them in advance. Private family meal, no guests, no sound system, no tents, finished by 7 p.m. We were trying. We really were. By 4 p.m., a light breeze stirred the red, white, and blue flag above our porch. My nieces chased bubbles. My sister laid out slices of watermelon. Dad was laughing softly with my uncle as I flipped a few burgers on a small electric grill, not even charcoal this time. Everything was perfect, until the cruiser pulled up again. This time only one. Officer Drexler stepped out with a tired face and an apologetic shrug. Afternoon, he said. Another call came in. You're kidding, I said, wiping my hands. We followed every rule. No charcoal, no noise, nothing. I know. I read the HOA bylaws before I even got out of the car. Drexler replied. Caller said there were open flames and rowdy behavior threatening property value. Again, I looked over at Karen's house. Sure enough, the curtain fluttered. She was watching us like a sentry. My mom stepped forward. Rowdy, we're feeding a 70-year-old man corn on the cob. Drexler sighed. I'm not here to shut you down. Just had to follow up. But I do have to file a report procedure. Just then, tires crunched on the gravel behind him. A familiar truck. Tom stepped out in full uniform, this time badge hat the whole 9 yards. His arrival shifted the air. Drexler stood up straighter. My dad grinned and saluted. Karen's curtain froze mid-sway. Chief Drexler said, nodding. Officer Tom responded evenly. Got the call too. Wanted to make sure we're not arresting someone for seasoning ribs. Drexler chuckled under his breath. No arrests, just another Karen situation. Tom walked toward me. Mind if I inspect the grill? Be my guest, I said, lifting the lid with exaggerated care. Electric. Temperature set to 275. 1 hot dog and a turkey burger. Tom leaned in, nodded approvingly. I'd eat that, he said. And it doesn't violate a single code in the book. Karen's door opened. She marched halfway down her front steps and shouted across the street. Are you seriously allowing this? He's violating Section 6C. Open cooking on visible premises. Tom turned. Ma'am, with all due respect, Section 6C doesn't prohibit electric grills on private patios. You can read it yourself in the amended bylaws dated March 2018. Would you like a copy? Karen froze, hand clenched around her phone. Tom continued, voice louder now. This household is in full compliance. And if another baseless 911 call is made, it may qualify as criminal misuse of emergency services. Neighbors were watching from porches now. Karen glanced around, then turned and stormed back inside without a word. Tom turned back to us. I'd say the chicken's safe. We laughed, and for a moment things felt lighter. But I saw it in Tom's eyes. This wasn't over. When the officers left, Tom stayed behind for cobbler and sweet tea. While the kids played, he leaned close and whispered, I pulled dispatch logs. She's made 6 non-emergency calls about your house in 3 weeks. That's a pattern. And a problem, I said. He nodded. Start saving everything. Emails, voicemails, HOA letters. Because if she's building a paper trail, we need one too. Before he left, he placed a small discreet audio recorder on our porch table. In case things escalate, he said, they would. By Monday morning, the email hit my inbox like a thunderclap. Subject: formal complaint regarding improper law enforcement conduct and homeowner violations. It came from the official HOA email address, but the tone and wording screamed Karen. Her fingerprints were all over it. The body of the email read like a novella. Wild accusations, claims of favoritism by local police, intentional neighborhood destabilization, and of course her new favorite phrase, undue grilling privileges. It demanded that I be barred from hosting any outdoor events for a minimum of 6 months, and more shockingly, that the HOA petitioned the city to have my cousin Tom investigated for dereliction of duty and conflict of interest. She didn't just want me quiet, she wanted war. And she wanted to take down the police chief to do it. My phone rang before I could even finish reading. It was Tom. She sent the same thing to the mayor's office, he said, unamused, and to internal affairs. They called me this morning. My stomach dropped. You're kidding. I wish, he said, but I'm not worried. I'm clean. What concerns me is how far she's willing to go. This isn't just petty anymore. It's tactical. I sat down at the kitchen table, the email open in front of me, like a threat in digital ink. She's trying to weaponize the HOA, I muttered. Exactly, Tom replied. And it's not the first time she's tried to use bureaucracy to bully people into submission. I checked her name in our community database. She's filed nearly 24 complaints in the last year. Most against older residents, widows, renters, people who don't have time to fight back. My jaw clenched. She's a predator. She's a manipulator who hides behind rules, Tom said. And now she's chosen you. That same evening, an emergency HOA board meeting was announced. Topic: recent controversies involving law enforcement interference and community disturbances. No doubt in my mind, Karen was behind it. And this time, she wasn't just bringing bylaws, she was trying to reshape them. I walked the neighborhood the next day, quietly speaking with folks who had shown up to our BBQs or witnessed the incidents. Many were sympathetic, some even apologetic. One elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, clutched my hand and whispered, "She did the same thing to my grandson last year. He was just skateboarding. She said he was brandishing a weapon. It was a toy lightsaber." I compiled a list of names, people with stories, dates, patterns. Karen's reign wasn't just annoying, it was systemic. By the night of the meeting, the community center was full. Residents sat in stiff folding chairs, murmuring nervously. At the front table sat the HOA board. 5 people I'd seen at events, jogged past on morning walks, waved at in traffic. And next to them, in a pristine white blouse and a pin that read "Neighborhood First," was Karen. She stood and cleared her throat. "I'd like to begin by reading a formal proposal," she said, holding up a stack of papers. "In light of recent safety concerns and potential conflicts of interest with local law enforcement, I propose a moratorium on all outdoor cooking appliances gatherings exceeding 5 individuals and the presence of off-duty law enforcement in an unofficial capacity." The room gasped. One board member, a balding man named Greg, asked, "Wait, are you saying we can't have a family birthday party if a cousin's a cop?" Karen remained stone-faced. "Until we can ensure impartiality in neighborhood enforcement, it's a necessary precaution." That was my cue. I stood. "May I speak?" Greg nodded. "You're the subject of this complaint. You have every right." I walked to the front, folder in hand, voice steady. "My name is David. I've lived here 9 years. You all know me. You've been to my house. You've tasted my wife's peach cobbler and watched your kids play with mine. I'm not the threat here." I laid the folder on the table and opened it. Inside are 6 accounts from residents who've received false or exaggerated reports from Mrs. Karen in the past 12 months. Skateboarding, wind chimes, a flag that flapped too loudly. These are not violations. They're vendettas. Karen's eyes widened. I pulled out a printed copy of the bylaws. Nowhere in here does it prohibit electric grilling family visits or having a cousin who happens to serve as police chief. A quiet chuckle rippled through the room. But what it does prohibit is harassment, misuse of HOA authority, filing knowingly false reports, and inciting conflict between neighbors. The board flipped through my folder. Karen tried to interrupt. "This is slander. He's manipulating," Ma'am Gregg said, holding up a hand. "Let him finish." I turned to face the room. HOAs were designed to protect communities, not divide them. Not weaponize rules to target people we dislike. We all want peace, safety, respect. But that begins with how we treat each other. Silence, then applause. Not loud, but firm. From the back row, Mrs. Henderson stood and clapped. Then a couple who'd recently moved in. Then a retired firefighter who'd once been on the board himself. Karen sat frozen. Greg turned back to her. "We'll be reviewing your proposal, but we'll also be reviewing your complaint history. It's clear there's more going on here." Karen stood abruptly and left without another word. As the meeting adjourned, people came to shake my hand, pat my back, thank me. Tom called later that night. "You did good," he said. "She's not done," I replied. "No," he agreed, "but neither are we." The fallout from the emergency meeting didn't settle the storm, it stirred it. Over the next few days, Karen went quiet, which only made everyone more nervous. That kind of silence didn't mean retreat. It meant regrouping. I spent that week carefully organizing everything. Videos, testimonies, printed violations, and every piece of evidence that painted a clear picture of Karen's pattern. Her behavior wasn't just annoying, it was abusive, targeted, calculated. Tom and I met at his office Thursday evening. He wore civilian clothes, but there was no mistaking the authority he carried with him, even off-duty. "She's been doing this for a while," I said, spreading out files on the conference table. But no one connected the dots. Each person thought they were alone. Tom nodded slowly. "It's a textbook pattern: isolating, intimidating, escalating. She weaponizes procedure to create fear." He pointed at a printed complaint where Karen accused a Vietnamese family of disturbing neighborhood decorum for hanging red lanterns during Lunar New Year. "And look at this one," I said, sliding over a report she filed about a teenager wearing suspicious clothing. It was a hoodie, in January. "I've already flagged her name to our Community Affairs Division," Tom said. "But before we go official, I think the HOA deserves one last chance to clean its own house." We agreed on one thing: if the next HOA meeting didn't lead to a real reckoning, we'd escalate. I prepared a presentation, not flashy, just factual. I even edited a short video montage from doorbell cams and neighborhood footage showing Karen in action, berating a woman over solar lights, snapping photos of mailboxes, and storming onto porches uninvited. The next HOA meeting was more crowded than any I'd seen. Word had spread, and people wanted to see what would happen. Karen wasn't at the front table this time. She sat off to the side, arms folded, lips tight. The board looked tense. Greg, the same board member who'd kept order during the last meeting, opened with a sigh. Tonight's agenda includes a continuation of last week's discussion, as well as several formal submissions from residents. I stood when he called my name, but before I could speak, a woman 2 rows back raised her hand. Can I say something first? Greg hesitated, then nodded. My name's Angela. I moved here 8 months ago. Ms. Karen reported me for unauthorized gardening. I was planting tomatoes. The room murmured. Another man stood. I'm Frank, retired Navy. I got a notice for leaving my garbage bins out one night. Just one. But the way the letter was worded, it felt threatening. Then, a couple in their 50s. She took photos of our daughter's birthday party and claimed we were operating an unlicensed childcare facility. One by one, they rose. I never gave my presentation. I didn't need to. The room had already seen enough. Karen tried to speak, mumbling something about neighborhood standards, but her words drowned in a chorus of lived experience. Greg stood. It's clear we need to revisit our complaint process, and we need to be honest about how power has been misused. He looked at Karen directly. We're placing a temporary freeze on all enforcement actions until we can complete a full audit. And we'll be forming a resident oversight subcommittee starting tonight. Someone in the back clapped, then others joined in. Karen stormed out. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Tom called that night. She's not just losing influence, she's losing credibility. Let's make sure it stays that way, I said. But Tom's next words caught me off guard. I ran her name through a deeper system today, he said. Turns out she was on probation 5 years ago for impersonating a social worker. I blinked. What? Same pattern, different setting. And it gets better, she once filed a lawsuit claiming emotional injury from non-compliance against a PTA. I laughed, shocked, exhausted, strangely vindicated. This woman's a full-time menace. We're building the case, Tom said. And next time she steps out of line, we'll be ready. That weekend, I received a letter in my mailbox, not from the HOA, but from the couple across the street. Handwritten, thanking me for standing up for giving their daughter a safe place to ride her scooter without fear. It wasn't over, but we were no longer alone. After the meeting, momentum shifted. For the first time in months, the community had a sense of unity. People were talking to one another, comparing stories, and most importantly, comparing letters. It turned out Karen wasn't just a rogue neighbor with a clipboard and a bad attitude. She had been actively influencing internal HOA processes, getting certain pet complaints pushed through, without proper review, and even intimidating quieter board members with veiled legal threats. Tom and I met again the following Monday evening at his office. This time, we had something that changed everything: a whistleblower. Cynthia, a former HOA secretary, had emailed me over the weekend saying she was ready to talk. She joined us in person, nervous at first, but determined. I quit 3 months ago, she said, fingers twisting a silver ring. I couldn't stomach it anymore. She pulled a folder from her bag. Inside, internal emails. Real ones. Karen had been pressuring the HOA president, Rick, to approve policy amendments without full board votes. In one message, she said, "If you don't act, I'll go directly to our legal counsel and say you're negligent." In another, she offered to personally track enforcement on properties that were at risk of degrading visual harmony. One email chilled me to the bone. The BBQ house is a perfect example. We can't let that kind of energy spread. Once one family does it, the others will follow. If the board won't act, I will. Tom looked at me. She was trying to engineer the culture of the neighborhood through soft harassment, and she was doing it with Rick's compliance, I added. Cynthia nodded. He caved. A lot. We compiled everything. Emails, testimonies, and a spreadsheet showing an uncanny pattern. More than 70% of all enforcement notices over the past year were directed at families of color, young couples, and recent move-ins. Karen wasn't just difficult. She was dangerous. That week, I filed a formal complaint to the county with Tom's help, backed by documentation. He, in turn, flagged the HOA for civil rights review by the state's Department of Housing. But while the gears of bureaucracy turned slowly, we turned to something faster: public accountability. I built a website, simple, secure, and anonymous, called Neighbors for Transparency. Within 48 hours, 19 residents submitted stories. By the weekend, that number doubled. A man from 2 streets over posted about Karen photographing his wife during yoga in their backyard. Another woman said Karen told her, "Your curtain fabric clashes with the neighborhood's palette," before filing a noise complaint because her wind chimes were disruptive. Even longtime residents were horrified. But then came the final spark. One night, my doorbell camera caught Karen sneaking up to our mailbox. She opened it illegal and peeked inside. She didn't take anything, but she stood there for a full minute, looking around, clutching a folder. I uploaded the footage to the website. It went viral locally, at least. Neighborhood groups exploded. The HOA was flooded with emails, and Tom, he took the video straight to the county prosecutor. That Sunday, we received a formal notice. Karen was under investigation for potential civil harassment, mail tampering, and abuse of administrative authority. And the HOA, they were forced to call for an emergency election of new board members. It felt like we were finally dismantling the shadow system Karen had built, one petty threat, one fake complaint, one forged influence at a time. The community began to breathe. Lights returned to porches. Grills lit again. But I knew there was still one more battle ahead, accountability not just for Karen, but for every official who had let her run unchecked. The sun was still low when the first sheriff's car rolled through the gates of our neighborhood. It wasn't a sirens blazing moment. This wasn't a bust, but it was official, quiet, surgical, and long overdue. Tom had called me early that morning, his voice calm but unmistakably firm. "She's being brought in for questioning today," he said. "We finally got what we needed." And we had. After the footage of Karen peeking into my mailbox went semi-viral on local neighborhood groups, several other residents came forward with similar stories, some even worse. One woman had security cam evidence of Karen yelling at her daughter for using chalk on the sidewalk. A retired teacher had a note slipped into his door unsigned, but unmistakably, Karen's wording saying he lowered the visual tone of the street with his flower pots. But it wasn't just the harassment. It was the pattern. The way Karen had manipulated HOA policies, filed complaints with fraudulent interpretations of bylaws, and pressured the previous board president, Rick, to greenlight enforcement actions without votes. In some cases, she'd outright forged documents using scanned HOA letterheads to issue warnings that were never formally approved. Cynthia, the former HOA secretary, provided all of it. Emails, logs, screenshots. Meeting transcripts where Rick admitted in hushed tones that he let Karen run the ship because she was relentless. That alone triggered civil action. But the real bombshell, an anonymous email sent through our website with a PDF attachment, a scanned document from 5 years ago, showing that Karen had been legally banned from serving in any formal HOA role in a previous subdivision following a court settlement for racial targeting and harassment. She had simply moved neighborhoods and started over, no background checks. No one thought to ask. Tom made sure the county saw it. The official charge wasn't flashy civil harassment, abuse of HOA authority, and mail tampering, but the impact devastating. Karen was escorted to the precinct. No handcuffs, no news crew. But she looked pale, shriveled in on herself. She refused to speak without a lawyer. Back in the neighborhood, the fallout continued. The HOA released an official statement that evening. It read like damage control, but they confirmed 3 major things. Karen had resigned all informal roles effective immediately. A full audit of past violations would be conducted. An emergency election would be held to restructure the board. But they didn't apologize, not publicly. The apology came later in an envelope. It was handwritten, signed by 3 current board members, addressed to me, but meant for everyone. It read in part, "We allowed one person's control to override the voices of many. We apologize to you and your family for the distress and division caused. We will do better." I read it out loud at a small block gathering the following weekend. People clapped, some cried. Tom stood beside me in uniform, not as the cousin, but as the police chief who had kept his oath even when it was personal. Sometimes, he said, the hardest fights are the quiet ones. The ones where you don't break the rules to win, but you make sure the rules are finally followed by everyone. Karen's legal case moved slowly. It wasn't the kind of thing that led to jail time, but it did lead to consequences, a restraining order, a civil fine, and most importantly, a permanent ban from any HOA activity ever again in the state. Rick, the former HOA president, resigned quietly the next month. His name never made headlines, but we knew. The neighborhood began to heal. BBQs returned, sidewalk chalk bloomed, curtains opened, and I got invited to speak at a local council meeting about residents' rights under HOA law. I brought Cynthia with me. "Don't underestimate what one loud neighbor can do," she said on the mic. "But never forget what one loud truth can undo." It was the kind of day that made the fight worth it. The sky was clean, a bright summer blue, with just enough cloud cover to keep the heat gentle. The smell of mesquite drifted through the air before a single burger hit the grill. Laughter bubbled up from the yard before I even stepped outside. This time, it wasn't just my family gathered, it was the whole block. Every lawn chair we owned was out. My neighbor Luis brought over extra folding tables, and Mrs. Patel set up her homemade lemonade stand under the big oak tree by the driveway. Kids chased each other with chalk-streaked palms and plastic water guns. Music played low through outdoor speakers just enough to dance without bothering anyone. No complaints today. Not a single one. That afternoon marked the first neighborhood BBQ since Karen's fall from self-appointed power. But it felt like more than that. It was a celebration of something deeper, of community, reclaimed, of boundaries reestablished, and of joy without fear. Tom arrived just before noon. He wasn't in uniform today, just jeans and a faded blue polo. Still, everyone recognized him instantly. The man who once stepped out of a cruiser to de-escalate an unnecessary crisis was now strolling up my driveway with a six-pack of root beer and a smirk. "You still using that same cheap charcoal?" he joked. I upgraded. Hickory blend, I shot back. I figured the police chief deserved a proper sear. He laughed and handed me a bag. Inside was a metal sign custom engraved, BBQ, protected by the chief himself. I held it up, everyone cheered. We hung it above the grill, right where Karen's old surveillance camera used to face. A perfect middle finger made of stainless steel and family pride. As the day unfolded, stories were swapped over grilled corn and potato salad. One neighbor admitted they'd nearly sold their house because of the stress. Another said they'd felt watched for years, without realizing how much it had affected their children's sense of safety. But now they talked about organizing a real community committee, one not tied to HOA enforcement, but to mutual support. Cynthia showed up too. I hadn't expected her, but she walked in quietly with a peach cobbler in hand and a shy smile. People recognized her from the website. One by one, they came to thank her not just for what she did, but for daring to speak first. That night, after the grill cooled and the kids were passed out on blankets under string lights, I sat with Tom on the back steps. We looked out over a yard full of neighbors turned friends, of once silent families, now laughing together under paper lanterns. "You think it'll last?" I asked. He sipped his drink and took a long breath before answering. "If enough people keep showing up for each other, yeah, it'll last. Just don't let them forget." I won't. Because the truth was, power thrives in silence. And what Karen had tried to do, what so many HOAs, when left unchecked, are capable of, wasn't just about rules or lawns or BBQs. It was about control, about making people feel smaller than they are. But that day, surrounded by music and mesquite smoke and the smell of peach cobbler cooling in the breeze, it was clear control was gone. Community had taken its place. And that stainless steel sign, it stayed up long after the party ended, because it wasn't just a joke, it was a promise. We weren't going back. Not ever again.